This is Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, not to be confused with his brother Scott, who is his twin and also an astronaut, but not also a member of Congress. But the Pentagon is announcing that this Kelly, Mark Kelly, the senator, may actually get called back up to his duty. And this is dealing with the video in which he and other lawmakers tell service members that they must refuse illegal orders, which they must. But this move could actually lead to a recall that's not really in the ordinary sense of the word, but it's actually possible. The courts are actually looking for this one, and it could actually court-martial the captain. Officials say they received the serious allegations of misconduct and cited a federal law that allows retired officers to be brought back into uniform for prosecution under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ, if you will. This is extraordinary steps since Kelly is a sitting U.S. senator, as well as a retired Navy captain and a former astronaut, and Department of Defense has traditionally tried to stay out of partisan politics. So, the controversy centers around the 90-second video that was released last week featuring Kelly and 5 other Democratic lawmakers, all with military or intelligence backgrounds, speaking directly to active duty troops. In the clip, Kelly and others remind service members that they can refuse illegal orders, while colleagues say they must stand up for our laws, our Constitution, and not carry out commands that violate either. Video never names a specific order, which is part of the problem, but it came amid reports that Donald Trump administration has authorized aggressive anti-drug operations abroad. Those bombs or those fishing boats in Venezuela are one of the big targets, including the legal strikes on those as suspected drug traffickers in our war on Venezuela, if you will. Democrats argue that this stretches the laws for folks who are actually piloting those drones and firing those missiles because they could be following illegal orders that could come back to haunt all of us and them specifically. In a statement from the Pentagon on Kelly's comments, they believe they have interfered with the loyalty, morale, and good order of discipline of the armed forces and warn that next steps could include recalling him to active duty for court-martial or using lesser administrative actions. But he has to be back in uniform to do that. Fox News actually highlighted the Defense Department's language as a court-martial threat. And of course, Reuters and AP are stressing that it's rare to even think this up, let alone to pull a seated lawmaker back onto the stand as a military officer to see any sort of legal issues here. Legal experts are basically trying to figure out what's going on. And while retired officers are technically still subject to the UCMJ, and this Kelly is actually still in range to be called back up just in case the big war starts and serve back as a captain in 06 in the Navy. Using these powers this way basically faces seriously issues of how the Constitution actually works and challenges going forward. And like the why. Why are we doing this? Of course, Kelly says he first learned about the possible recall from a social media post by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Not a fan of that guy. And he quickly issued a statement calling the move an attempt at to intimidate him for doing his job. He also argues that the reminding troops of their duty to refuse unlawful orders is actually part of his job in the Constitution because he swore an oath to the Constitution to defend the Constitution, which tells a very, very detailed note for all troops who defend the Constitution that they basically have not only the right or the ability, but the right to not take any lawful orders. The biggest thing is, who makes an order lawful? Lawyers have to work those things out. But he's not undermining the rule of law. He's basically reminding that the troops that if giving an order from a commander is unlawful, you have to not follow it because that's what we do. Quote from Kelly, bullies who care more about their own power than protecting the Constitution is basically how he's describing the man, Pete Hegseth. President Trump, meanwhile, has labeled Kelly and the other video persons the seditious six and claims on social media that their actions amount to sedition and, quote, punishable by death. And in his Truth Social, death is all capitalized. I just had to say that. The language that democracy is what we do. It puts a target on their backs, further inflames the threats against lawmakers that are going on right now in times like these. Democratic leaders, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, have condemned the investigation as a dictator-style use of military to punish political opponents. Some Arizona outlets describe it as a new level of lawfare in U.S. politics. Commentators and other outlets as saying that they take note, the case is going to test the line between free speech, and military discipline, especially since the person with the free speech has the right to say these things as a former person in the military. But if he were a commander and literally said, don't listen to this guy's order, it might be a totally different thing. And civilian oversight and partisan control, because Kelly's a civilian now, but the military wants to pull him back in to discipline him for something he has a right to say. Even some legal experts are critical of the video, and they are warning that the actual recall and prosecution is a bad thing to do from both the side of the Pentagon, not wanting to step on the rule of law, and just the backfire by turning Kelly into a symbol for political resistance if it does happen. Now, supporters of the Pentagon's move say that the military must actually protect its chain of command and cannot allow senior figures, especially those still under UMCJ, to encourage disobedience in ways that might confuse or politicize the ranks. Essentially, the younger troops will listen to Kelly because he's an older commander and they think they like him, so he won't listen to their current command. That's the thought process. Although Kelly's arguing, all I'm saying is, if your commander says something you shouldn't be doing and you know better, don't do it, because that's what you're supposed to do. The argument is that if retired officers use their rank and status to speak directly to troops and the orders they follow, it's weakening the good order and discipline of the folks in actual command if they're left unchecked. Critics see this as threatening to recall and possible court-martial a sitting senator is dangerous politicization of the armed forces and a form of retaliation that's well beyond what they've even tried before. It looks bad. It looks terrible. It looks awful. We shall see if Senator Kelly once again becomes Captain Kelly and has to face these charges in front of the Department of War General. Well, it's not a general. He's just a dude. Pete Hegseth and whatever goes on there. Of course, it's not even Department of War, which is a whole nother ball of wax that we don't have time to talk about here. We are living way too interesting times, and we are all suffering for it.